Thank you very, very much, Heike, for the presentation. Very, very interesting. And you see also claps coming in from the audience. And with that, I would also like to open up the floor for discussion. I think, Heike, you've given us a lot of thoughts on the usefulness or the use of digital technology, a wide variety of digital technology. And I've taken a lot of the warnings also that you issued, that one shouldn't be too naive in thinking that this is a panacea and solution for all the problems. One slide you showed, I was actually a bit sad to see the spider diagram where the researchers seem to have no role to play amongst all the extension officers and the input and output providers and the farmers and nobody talks to the researchers and nobody wants to actually deal with them. And I think that's something we have to think about as we move on in our work. Yeah, I invite questions from the audience. The moment I can't see everybody, I'm just going to change my view here. So the floor is open. Please do raise your hands or open your microphone directly. We're a relatively small group of 14 participants today. Who wants to be first? Michael. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. And I raised my hand because I had the same question on my tongue than you. Why are researchers so underrepresented in these networks, and what can we do? Because when I think about our research on sustainable supply chains or sustainable land management, yeah, we think that that agricultural knowledge, formal agricultural knowledge systems, including researchers, are the backbone and the key information channel and source. But that doesn't seem to be the case. What can we do? Is it because researchers are simply not interested? Is it because they are not assumed to know anything of practical value, or what are the reasons behind?
Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the graph showed connections through mobile phones, but I think they all talk through mobile phones, so it doesn't change that message. Well, what can we do? I mean, it's a fundamental problem in many African contexts, right? And our African colleagues can explain that better than me. But and maybe they even have an answer to that particular question, which is much broader than digitalization. But it's one of the fundamental issues around linkages between extension services and agricultural. Especially national agricultural research institutes, because you would think that there's enough knowledge in the institutes, and I'm sure it works better in some countries than others, like in where they're more connected. But then you also have different. They might not always be the same district that is responsible. You know, extension services might be at a different administrative level than the national agricultural research institutes, and there's certainly, as far as I can tell, no linkages between extension and universities and extension and international organizations. So this is, I don't really have an answer. I just think I agree with you. That is one of the crucial points that needs to be strengthened in the whole innovation system, because that becomes a bigger question, and you know all about systems. So it's an innovation system question, is how do you link that? Yeah. But maybe David has a better answer than me.
David, go ahead.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you, Prof. Baumüller, for the interesting presentation. I'm not sure I have an answer to that question. Perhaps I'll just, my view would be that I think the connection between science, policy, practice generally in Africa is weaker as compared to the situation that exists in other parts of the world. My own question has to do with the issue of automation. I'm wondering, I want your opinion on this. What's your view? Given that Africa is one of the rapidly urbanizing regions in the world, we have a large youth bulge, and we experience high levels of unemployment among the youth and different segments of the population. Would you recommend that we pursue automation in agriculture and other areas where, I mean, given that agriculture is also one of the biggest employer the biggest sector where people easily find jobs within the continent.
Yeah, so you mean mechanization at the farm level? Is that, yeah? Well, it's because employment is one thing, but it's also the type of employment and the quality of employment, right? And if you have, I would be one to say that mechanization is important because you, who wants to stay on the farm otherwise, right? I mean, you might have a large population that could theoretically work in agriculture, but if the youth will only stay in agriculture if it's profitable, right? I mean, it's as simple as that. And if you have to find ways of making it profitable, and people are moving into the cities, as you said. So you also need to cope with the fact that at this point, I don't think rural labor is a problem yet, but it will become a problem eventually when more people move out. So I think mechanization is important, not only for productivity increases, but also just for making the sector interesting and attractive. Because I think most people probably wouldn't want to stay a small-scale farmer with a hoe or an ox if they could have a possibility to have mechanization. And we did some research, in fact, on in Zambia, colleagues of ours, and they were looking at what does it mean if you introduce mechanization? How does it change labor? And what they were finding is that it meant that they could increase their area that they operate. It meant they could hire people, many more. And what they did with their free time was to then go off and do off-farm work, especially the women. So it didn't mean that they were out of work and they were sitting idle. It actually created created hired labor, and it freed up time for off-farm activities. So it's dynamic, right?
Yeah. Okay, but then maybe just sorry, before I take you to spin that further is once you think about not only mechanization but also the use of digital tools for the farm, like precision agriculture and these kinds of things that you also mentioned that we have in some cases. How realistic would that be at this point in time, apart from drones flying over some fields to do some assessments, which I've seen happening, like you look at larger farms, at hotspots of diseases or something like that you could see. Is there, what's your take on that?
Well, you said, well, apart from drones, but I think drones is one area where you do have potential, because what I like about drones is that you can also create a business out of it, right? So it's a form of employment generation for rural areas, because you have these companies that have they use satellite images, right? That have high-end computers that calculate things, and then they offer services, and that's fine too. And it can help farmers if you manage to do the last mile to a farmer. But the thing about drones is that it's local. It can be run by local people who understand the local context. And at this point, I don't see maybe the biggest potential even yet in complex services that need a lot of data, a lot of machine learning. I went to a conference in Germany once where they were discussing all these types of services of, complicated data-heavy types of services. And even they were saying, we don't have enough data. And I thought, well, if you don't have enough data, how can we run them? So I don't think one needs to aim that high to be useful. And I actually like drones and image. If you can just find in your field where you have pest problems, that you can go there, right? That's already helpful. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, Michael, you lost your hand. Did you accidentally put it up?
He's busy now. He says he's busy.
All right. Okay. Any other point from the audience? If not, I would have a question in between. You mentioned towards the end of your presentation how, well, you were warning from the development of own apps, and this is certainly something that also within the regional projects, several of us plan to develop some kind of apps And you were saying rather using or building platforms. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? So who would be operating these platforms, and who would establish them? How would they work? Because at the end of the day, I guess projects who work on certain things would really like to see their results in the farmer's hands in the end, if not through your own app. But how do you think these consolidated platforms would work?
Yeah, you're seeing them emerge a lot. In fact, nowadays, where you have you have different types of models. You have DigiFarm, for example, in Kenya, which is a model which is run by Safaricom, the ones that run M-Pesa, and they do like a building block system where they absorb all sorts of different digital agricultural services into their. So they have a like their own M-Pesa, but then they also have an insurance scheme and then information scheme. So they are all different types that come together on a platform. It's quite controlled by Safaricom. Then you have people like AgroCenter in Ghana, which tries to run its platform by offering the services itself. So that's another way. Google Play Store is a platform, right? That's a different level, which is simply a platform where people can sell their app through the platform. And the role of Google is just to allow people access to manage the payments, to have a rating system, So this is where you have different levels, and you have they're emerging in different countries. So I think if I had to do this, I would start mapping. I would map the system for the environment first, the digital agricultural environment in the country. Because you might find, depending on which country it is, you might find that your particular area of intervention fits with a service that's like iCow, for example, is pretty big for a digital agriculture service. So you could say, okay, why don't I just feed my information into iCow rather than trying to develop my own app? Because I've seen so many apps come and go, and you create expectations by the farmers. There's yet another app. A lot of them don't even have smartphones. So who's going to use the app? Who's your target audience? And then you have an app, and then it comes, and then it survives for a while the project is running, and then it goes again. And I'm much more of a fan of just going and finding partners in the countries. There's so many smart startups. Yeah, Kenya and Ghana and Nigeria. It's so exciting when you go there and you see these young people developing local solutions for problems, and they sometimes might need a bit of startup funding, and then to then move with your idea. So I would just really I would usually tend to rather go for what is like team up with what is there already rather than inventing a new app.
I guess that's what most projects do. I mean, that's what I know from projects who develop apps, is that they do it with local developers. I saw Margarita nodding her head. Maybe you can share a little bit with your experience with InfoRange, how you're planning to develop your app system.
For the talk, my afternoons are very unpredictable with my childcare situation. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to access the recording of the talk that was in the earlier half hour. This issue about apps and the platforms is definitely really interesting to me, because in InfoRange we are developing an app, and a big part of what we've been doing is that we've reviewed the existing apps so that we can synchronize with ones that are functioning better and not recreating something that's already existing, and looking at what are the flaws in the existing ones. So a big issue is that, for example, the app that ILRI, the International Livestock Research Institute, has been using uses what's called NDVI for vegetation, which is very much about the color of the landscape. So how green is the pasture in the rangeland? And something that we've been looking at is how do we work together with the herding communities to find out more about what is meaningful for them in terms of the types of landscape. And so we're also integrating machine learning with photos that are taken at the landscape level. And then something that they've been saying is some areas that have green pasture, the plants are actually not very nutritious. And so even though they show up as green for like satellite imagery, it's not something that they consider the most useful pasture because it's not the type of plant that is most nutritious for their livestock. And so what we're doing is we're trying to integrate these aspects and doing it as a co-design process. So working together with the pastoralist herders in Marsabit County, Kenya, and also in Namibia. So that's what we're working on, but I would really love to hear the rest of the talk from the earlier part so that I can connect what's been said in the Q&A in a more meaningful way. So that's a little bit about what we're doing. I hope I didn't talk too long on that, but yeah, I'm really, it's like not recreating something that nobody wants to use because then it's a waste.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Great. Anybody else from Coins or Declaré who would like to share a little bit your plans and your early experiences with developing digital tools? I see that some people have just connecting here, which is very interesting. Okay. Paula Rothenberger, you're from GIZ.
Thank you. First of all, it's nice to see you again, Heike. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question. It's not so much related to digital solutions for agriculture, but you said on your last slide that the vast of information is really impacting AI and so on. Do you see that this is, first of all, also impacting digital solutions in some kind of way, like that it's putting some sort of bias on the type of software that is developed or so on? And do you know if there are any measures that can be taken to prevent this sort of bias?
Yeah, that's a very good point. In fact, it's something we would like to look into. I don't think anyone's looked into it so much. It's something because there's no in none of the countries I know of sort of standards for digital agricultural solution, quality control. Anyone can start an app and sell it, and if someone wants to buy it or use it, they use it. So there's no standards of. I mean, we don't know if the information is wrong or right. Is it sustainable? Is it unsustainable? Is it so it's where we don't know enough, but I'd like to do more. But then I've already given my answer to your second point. I think we need ways of doing quality control and platforms could be one way, because if you have, for example, quality control through the platform, or you could have it through users of a service who then write reviews, like you would do on Amazon, for example, or you could have government standards that actually have certain regulations for the type of advice or agricultural information that is given about requiring quality control mechanisms, that sort of thing. I think we would need much more of that.
As I don't see any hands, I would like to chip in again, following maybe also a little bit on what Margareta was saying. If you're developing apps, vegetation indices, but then again, what we heard Heike say, which you missed, Margareta, because you could only link in later, is that so few people actually use smartphones in Africa. In East Africa, there are more, so you are on safe grounds, maybe working in Kenya, but I'm not even sure how it is in Namibia, in your other country in InfoRange. And what can one do, or what kinds of information systems are useful for the farmers who have only a Nokia phone available? Or how can you circumvent that? I mean, would there be a possibility of thinking of like central stations that are connected to internet, mobile smartphones or something like that, where farmer could access the information? Well, what would be both of your thoughts, to Margareta and Heike? I would really like to hear from both of you.
Yeah, this goes back to what I was suggesting earlier, is to work more with intermediaries, to not always think that the target audience has to be the farmer. Because we found in this survey of intermediaries, we also asked them what kind of phone they used. And it was interesting to see that extension agents almost exclusively used smartphones. And we deliberately also did our survey in Mali, because we wanted to add a country where we would not expect it to be a high share. and even their smartphone use was very high. And it was also fairly high amongst input dealers. They were, which I also didn't quite expect, and lowest among output dealers. But so you can do that. You can either work through extension agents, you can give out smartphones to community leaders, for example, you know, find a way of people, and they will find a way to contact each other. They have each other's phone number, right? You don't, of course, you can then have an app to help them reach the farmer, but I think they reach anyway, right? If you have a community leader that then has a smartphone to get the information, they will have community group meetings to then pass on the information. So I think use the networks that are there. Again, not only in developing and implementing your app, but also in actually then implementing it. I'm so glad you can join, Tina. It was a fascinating talk.
I have much to share about rural connectivity.
Exactly.
You see, I was going to say that to Heike also in a comment to one of her early slides, in the gaps in connectivity we have in Germany is also quite
in the rural areas of Germany.
In rural areas is quite big. I think nobody made such a map as there has been done for Africa before, for Germany. Anyways, yeah, what I wanted to comment on your last point is indeed, I guess that working through the extension offices is probably the way to go. I think that in our research projects, the farmers are not the direct beneficiaries of the work. Am I right, Margareta? It's the same also for InfoRange, that you will be looking for your target groups are the extension.
No, it's actually not the case. Not that we would exclude the extension, the agricultural extension. We're collaborating with them, especially on the veterinary service provision part. But we're setting up a tech access hub where we're employing youth in the community to serve as a hub. And so it's like if someone just has a normal or non-smartphone, they could still call that person and say, hey, yeah, I see, you know, there's this strange insect that's been burrowing into the ear of my goat. Can you please tell me more about it? Or something like, so they would still be able to use exactly what you're saying. The networks are so important. So on the one hand, the networks looking at issues of inclusivity. So we have a PhD student who's based at Ditzel that just came on board. We're really happy. She's from the local community, the local Boran community. So she also has the insider perspective as a student from the area. And she'll be working to design peer-to-peer learning hubs that would be using the piece. And so it would be having the herders and livestock keepers doing the peer-to-peer learning together. Yeah.
That sounds really interesting.
We're doing our best. Yeah. But there are a lot of things. Something I'm really concerned about, and maybe you have some insights on this or someone in the broader group, is e-waste recycling. Because I've noticed in communities where electricity isn't very prominent, often you'll just find batteries scattered in the landscape, and they're like a big pollution risk. So if anyone has any contacts that could link me up with organizations that could help with that, because I know it's quite expensive to do battery and e-waste disposal properly. So if anyone has any contacts for that part of it, I'm very interested.
We'll take that. We'll raise it at good opportunities later on.
Yeah, closing the loop, right? It's like a benefit to the landscape in terms of management on one side, but not wanting to, I mean, the technology is coming in regardless of what we do as a project, because like we were saying, the younger people and people who are in different positions in the community, traders, shopkeepers, some of the people who are already serving on different committees, like environmental committees, peace committees, conflict resolution committees within their internal traditional authority structures. Some of them already have smartphones, even if it's not widespread across the community. So it's coming in more and more. But I would be happy if we could integrate a kind of closed loop aspect too. So, but it's outside of the scope of our project at the moment. So I would be happy if there's some networking that could help support that.
Right. Okay, we are nearing the end of our time slot. Any last points anybody would like to make? I would actually have one question. I think Dorcas has left, but David Anafo, you are still here. Have you yourself, oh, and Alex is there as well still. Have you yourselves had any experience in Ghana with some of these tools also that Heike mentioned? The agro, what did you call it? Agro center?
Well, Ezuko, maybe Ezuko.
Have you had
Yes.
Yes, Alex, you have?
Yes, I have come across Hisoko. It's one of the app, Regreening Africa. So I think for the places I have been at, Hisoko is more popular and it offers a lot more services for the farmers. So there is opportunity to seek weather information from the produce and then other services. And then the Regreening Africa app helps farmers to be able to know the exact size of their farms so that they are not cheated by service providers. So in the past, for example, in Northern Ghana, they were using ropes. They were pulling ropes to measure an acre or to determine an acre of land. And sometimes the extension agents, the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, came up with these ideas to help their farmers to shield them from being cheated by the service provider. And with time, the service providers also decided to come with their own ropes to determine an acre of land. So the Regreening Africa app, which has GIS capabilities, came in to solve some of these problems with determining the land size so that service providers can charge standard prices for the services that they provide.
Cool. Okay. And also measuring the land holding also provides a very nice link to David's presentation from last time on the land tenure issues. We just got a request in the chat from Margareta for some additional references and reading. Maybe Heike, could you provide us with some materials in the follow-up of this presentation? Do you just have some interest?
Yeah, what I did is for each of the slides where I put the source, I always linked it to the paper that goes with it or the report. So it's actually quite a good way of finding specific information related to the topic of each. Okay. So that I think that would be a good start. And if there's anything more specific, but these are a lot of them are also reviews and their overview reports. Yeah. Okay. They're always in the bottom. So you're welcome to share the slides if you want. And then there's always links at the bottom to all sorts of papers.
If you send me the slides or the presentation.
Sure.
That would be super. Cool. All right.
Hannah, just to add something small to what Alex said. The university that I work for, the University of Energy and Natural Resources, has a center known as the Earth Observation Research and Innovation Center. And they work a lot with farmers. And I think before I left, they were also working on developing apps and all that. That will help farmers track weather information and deal with fire hazards so that they can prevent their farms and crops from fire hazards during the dry season. So that is also happening in the University of Energy and Natural Resources.
Good. Right. So if I don't see any more hands, thank you very, very much to the audience again, and of course to Heike for this very inspiring presentation that you gave us at very short notice. Thank you also for jumping in as we lost a speaker in our colloquium series. There will be another presentation, another colloquium, the next one scheduled for the 30th of November, so watch this space. And this one will be given by Juliane Wiesenhütter from GIZ, and she will be talking about the land management activities of GIZ in Africa and introduce some very interesting, important data reservoirs, data repositories also to us. Thank you very much, Heike. Thanks, everybody, for being here. There comes some thank you in the chat also. As previously, we have recorded this presentation and the discussion. We'll put it all up at the IDOS YouTube channel. In the IDOS YouTube channel, you can already find the previous 2 presentations. And I'll send you the links in a message to all of you in the next couple of days with the presentations. Thank you very much. Thanks, Heike. Thanks, everybody. Tina, I'm glad that your electricity works again.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Heike. Thanks to all.
Bye.
Bye.